Nothing is overnight. Let's just continue to make a lot of progress every single day. We're not going to get rich overnight. It's every day. Just do it every day. Competitive stamina. Don't get bored. Don't get bored.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
All right, we are live from the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios today in Laguna Beach, California. And we just keep rolling out some incredible guests. We have a really great mystery guest coming on today. We normally don't dip into this side of it, but this man has been really an incredible success in business and through sports and a lot of other ventures as well. Mike Lombardi, thank you so much for joining us. What a pleasure on a Friday to have you on our show.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate being here. It was nice of you to say. I've lived a long time, so I think that's probably one of the reasons I've been successful. You just keep going, they don't knock you out.
That's great. So you've been part of the NFL for 35 plus years, which is incredible. Yeah. And let's kick things off. Share more about your football career and the teams you were a part of.
Well, I've been fortunate. My career has been serendipitous from the start. I got a job as Bill Walsh's driver in 1984. Essentially, I worked in the personnel department, but I was kind of his, whenever he needed something. There weren't many people that worked in the building, so they kind of just asked you to do, and I would do anything. Got to spend a lot of time with him, learned a lot from him, a lot. Every day he reminds me of what I learned from his voice in my head. And then I went to the Cleveland Browns I worked for Ernie Accorsi. Marty Schottenheimer was the head coach. And then then Belichick came in 91. I worked for him. And then I went and spent time, I spent 10 years with Al Davis, which is, in normal life, I would say that equates to 35 years. And then I left the league. I stayed in television, and then I went and took a job at the Cleveland Browns again. And then I ended up back with Belichick in New England for 3 more years and won 2 Super Bowls. So I've been really fortunate. I've worked for some really great owners. I worked for some really great people. And the story I tell is a story that really resonates through them.
So you wrote Gridiron Genius, a great book, and it recently launched your new book, Football Done Right. So, Mike, your books give an insider look at all the ins and outs of the NFL and the history of football. What do you think some of the things are that the NFL teams continue to get wrong about building a successful team? I know in business, building a team, especially at my company, Alliance, and being in commercial real estate, having a successful team is so important for the growth of the business. Can you share a little bit of insight on that?
Ben, I think I wanted Gridiron Genius to be titled The Bills of Rights, because it's really not a football book. It's a leadership book through the eyes of Belichick and Walsh. And I would say what most people get wrong in business is they don't know what the main thing is. They don't know who they are. They haven't really identified their core beliefs. And so they're constantly looking around. What does Steve Jobs talk about in terms of focus? When he went back to Apple, they had over 20 products on the market. And he came back and told the people at Apple that we're taking everything down that's not insanely great. That was his focus. And it wasn't, he listened to everybody. He focused on what was urgent and important. And I think most businesses at the end of the day, when they come into work, they don't know really what their business is. They lose sight of it. They let it slip. They go down another direction. You see it happen in football all the time. You get hired, you're a college head coach, and you just got hired at this really big program, right? And you make the most money of anybody on the staff, but you stop coaching. You're the best coach. You got the coaching job because you are the best coach. That's how you got the job. Now all of a sudden now you're talking to alumni. You're out there hobnobbing, you're raising money. That's when we lose the focus. And I would say if people ask me, what makes Belichick and Walsh similar is their ability to focus. They know what the main thing is, and they keep the main thing the main thing.
From those gentlemen, what would you see in their leadership skills that are just second to none, that they continue to thrive no matter what age they are?
Well, I mean, I was fortunate enough to listen to Coach Walsh tell me about how I should learn about leadership. And so in Gridiron, I wrote about this. But at the end of the day, leadership's four components, right? You got to know what the main thing is. And we call that command of attention. This is who we are. This is what we believe in. This is our ethos. And for football teams, that needs to really come from the owner. But if it comes from the coach, the owner's got to back it up. We are going to be a big physical football team who's mentally and physically tough. That's all we need. It doesn't need to be this elaborate thing. And then the second area is command of the message. You got to be a storyteller. Leaders have to tell a story, and you got to sell that story, and you got to be able to capture your audience. Walsh and Belichick never raised their voice. They never downgraded people. They never treated people inhumanely, but they were very honest, and they told a story every single day. And then the other area is called management of trust. They believed the culture needed maintaining every day. And that trust the players put in to maintain the culture was what made them successful. And then command of oneself. You can't be somebody you're not. You can't tell the people this is who we are, and then you don't behave that way. So if you want to be the leader, you got to be the hardest worker. If you want to be the leader, you got to be the best listener. If you want to be the leader, you've got to do the things that people see you do. You got to be the best reader, the best learner. And those four things are really what matters most in any business, And yet we tend to lose sight. I wrote this book. I wrote about it in Gridiron. Greatest project I ever did, Ben. I got hired by the Rams to put together a book on what it takes to make a great head coach. Mm-hmm. And basically all great coaches, forget the sport, all great leaders, forget this discipline, all come down to those four areas. They have a plan. They can explain their plan really well. People trust them to maintain the culture, and they discipline themselves. You do that, you're going to get people to follow you, and you're going to be successful.
There's no doubt. I mean, especially in my business in commercial real estate or any industry, it's so pertinent to lead by example, which is really what you're talking about, which Bill Walsh and Bill Belichick do. They lead by example. They're the hardest working men in the room. They're focused, they're disciplined. And it's like any business leader, you have to be on top of your game consistently. That's why you're the leader. It's not for the faint of heart. That's why you make the most money. That's why you have the most responsibility and most autonomy. It's because you have to become that person, and discipline and consistency and focus is so important. And I really appreciate you sharing it. What an incredible book you wrote. And I really appreciate it because leadership is not an easy skill. You really have to develop it over time and continue to focus on it and continue to improve. And you also mentioned something else is communication. It seems like both those gentlemen, along with yourself, really understand the art of communication. It's so important from the top down. It's so important to be able to communicate and inspire people, not motivate, but really inspire them to do what they need to do.
I think, I was fortunate enough because I started my career at a time when, I was an area scout. My first job was Walsh's, basically his gopher. But, then I would, in my other job in the building was to be a scout. And I had to learn how to write reports. And when I learned how to write reports, this was a time when we did not have the internet. We did not have video. We had 16 millimeter tape, which was very expensive. So there was only one canister of tape around. It was too expensive to duplicate. So when you wrote a report, you had to paint a picture of the player you were watching, because the person reading the report might not see the player. So you had to describe it. So if he did see it, the description matched what he sees. And that allowed me to become a storyteller. I had to tell a story. I had to shape a story. And, with the work I do with the Daily Coach, along with Coach Raveling and others, that's what we really try to do. Leadership is storytelling. You got to tell a story to the people you're leading to make them understand that their purpose, that what they do is as important as anything.
Can you share some stories from some of the folks that you've learned from, the Belichicks, the Walshes of the world, on leadership lessons, or other NFL greats that you worked with that really helped you in your career?
Well, I mean, all of them both had the ability to see the non-obvious. I read Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, and I did not know who Ryan was at the time. And I found his email online, and I sent him an email, and I said, "You just wrote the best book on Bill Belichick." And he said, what are you talking about? The book's on Marcus Aurelius. And I said, well, I think Belichick was Aurelius in another life. So they have this capacity. Both, I think what I've learned from them is block the noise out. Like, they're distractions. And if you're a leader, you have the information that you need to make the right decision. The people that are challenging you don't have half the information. And so you have to have conviction of the heart, and you've got to be broad enough in your knowledge. Henry Kissinger wrote in his memoirs, he said, when you go to Washington, you borrow an intellectual power you bring, and you can't renew it once it's there. Well, that might be true in Washington, but today's world, you have to renew your intellectual capacity, because if you don't, the world's going to catch you. And both those gentlemen had this insatiable appetite to learn. I mean, Walsh would send me to the bookstore, to the library. He would say that, we drafted a kid in 1986 that we found was a good player, but we found out he was on steroids. We didn't know anything about steroids. So I get a call up to the office and go down to the Stanford library and see what you can write up for me about what steroids really is. He wasn't shy or pretend he knew it all. I think the other commonality is curiosity, right? Both men are curious to an nth degree. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to take all these ideas and implement them. But they're curious to learn about them, and so they don't get embarrassed. They're not embarrassed to ask or say they don't know. And so I would head down to the library, and I wrote a report on Dynabald and all these drugs. I had no idea what I was writing. I just was writing it, but I learned, and I wrote it up for him so he could learn. So those are the kind of things that made me want to believe that the curiosity that you have to have is so important. Because if you're a leader today, it's ongoing. You must have renewable energy, or else you're going to fall flat.
Oh, it's so well said. I mean, you have to continue to keep growing, and growth is, especially in technology. And we've both seen it with the internet coming on and technology. It's like, if you don't continue to grow, you're right, things are going to pass you by. And so you have to keep pushing forward, keep growing. The other thing you touched on, which I thought was great, was vulnerability. Those gentlemen were vulnerable. They said, we don't know everything. And that's okay. A good leader, or someone great in business, or a great employee, when you can admit to someone and say, look, I don't know, but I will get the right answer. I'll bring in the right resources and become resource rich in order to be able to answer a question intelligently, but also help you be able to determine what you need to do to feed your curiosity as well.
Most people get embarrassed. Mm-hmm. Most people to ask that question. And McDonald's figured this out. It's hard to believe, but McDonald's figured this out. So I don't eat fast food, but I'm a fat guy. So if I do, I would. But now, if you go to McDonald's now, that you order by screen, and most people think it's just convenience, right? Well, we're technology people. We're up in the 21st. This is no. It's that screens about you don't want to be embarrassed, because you don't have a problem punching 2 Big Macs on that screen. But to tell the girl or the man at the counter you want 2 Big Macs, you're scared of their reaction. You're embarrassed. So you don't do it. McDonald's has seen a spike in sales because of those screens, not because of the efficiency, but because most people are embarrassed to do something they really want to do. And the moral of the story is these guys they didn't feel like embarrassed. They were in search of knowledge, which could never be embarrassing.
So when you were a GM, Mike, what was your scouting strategy and evaluation criteria for college players? And the reason why I ask you this is, you talk about leaders, we talk about business owners, entrepreneurs, and for our audience, evaluating employees and finding great talent, it doesn't matter whether you're in sports or business, it is a challenge, especially in this day and age. So what was your strategy and evaluation? How did different leaders you work with approach it as well?
So the two that really understood it the best were Walsh and Belichick, no lie. When I went to Cleveland, I didn't have Walsh or Belichick with me. Mm-hmm. So it was more difficult to hire people, because there were people that had their own voices that wanted the owner, the president, they had all theirs. But what I would do, if I had the authority, what I would do is what I learned from Walsh, which is scout inside out. So the FBI does not go looking for serial killers in the phone directory, right? They profile serial killers. If you're hiring people, you want to profile what you're looking for. For example, Bill Parcells, who I didn't work for, but I learned a lot from, he loved Jesuit educated people. He loved military background. He loved people that had to overcome something, that he could observe that they did something for the team that wasn't maybe for themselves. So that when that resume came in and you went to the University of Scranton and you did this, you're Jesuit okay, now you don't get the job, but you fit the criteria, right? And so what is the job? So what we learned in Cleveland was we got so tired of being disappointed in our hiring that we learned what Walsh told me in '84, that it's a lot easier to train than retrain. And so we started a farm system in Cleveland in 1992 where we hired all these young guys and then we trained them. And then we trained them our way, what we called, because this happened to me one day. He sent me to the airport to pick up Sherman Lewis. Sherman Lewis was the defensive coordinator of the Michigan State Fighting Spartans, okay?
Uh-huh.
And I'm picking him up at the airport and I'm bringing him back and we're going to interview him for the running back job. That made no sense to me at all, Ben. What are we doing? This guy's and so one day in the car, I finally asked Walsh, I said, Coach, why did we hire the running this? He says, because I wanted to be able to train him my way.
Mm.
And so what happens to most people when they hire, they want the fast solution. They want somebody who they think can enhance their organization immediately. But yet what they find is they're from a different way of doing it. And that you tend to lose your focus. So train, not retrain. And second, put down on a piece of paper what skills you value the most. Why Jesuit? Well, Jesuits are great teachers and they teach you how to write. One of the skills that you learn from going to a Jesuit school, as I'm sure you do from other schools, but this is is writing. And so whatever you think is most important to the criteria, then bring people in that you want to talk to that fit the criteria. So what is all this, is summing all this up? Finding talent is about elimination.
Mm-hmm.
Finding talent is about elimination. You eliminate people you don't find. When you have a criteria, that eliminate, if people that don't meet the criteria, that eliminates them.
Yeah, well said. So back to your scouting days earlier in your career, who are some of the players thinking about evaluating talent that you were most wrong on, and better or worse than expected? Who would you think oh my God, we didn't think he would turn to anything and superstar. And then on the other hand just didn't work out.
I think anytime you ask any scout about his career, and if he doesn't tell you the mistakes that he made, he's a bad scout, because they're the only things we can learn from, right? Mm-hmm. They're the only things we can cling to. If we want to sit there and pat ourselves on the back about who we found, that's okay, great. But I mean, so many of them, we drafted when I was at Washington State scouting, Reuben Mays was a running back. People don't remember, it was in the mid 80s, but I got so obsessed with trying to find somebody that had shake ability, that could make people miss like Barry Sanders, that I didn't know that if you got on an edge of a defender, you can be just as effective. So Reuben Mays taught me that, and so what you do is all through your mistakes, you learn that there's different ways of doing it. And so what I ultimately learned, which are the 4 Ps of scouting, right? And so we all do this. You do this, I do this, we all do it. There's 4 kinds of people that scout. And let's face it, everybody's a scout. You go to the grocery store, you're scouting. You're scouting which vegetables are good, And so the 4 Ps are simply, the first one is poor. You have no idea, you just can't see talent, but you're just a poor scout. The second one is the picker. Picks on one thing the player can't do and refuses to acknowledge the other things. This is what happens to you when you make your mistakes, right? You pick on the one thing and you ignore it. The third area is you just grade production. Well, this guy comes into work at 8 o'clock in the morning, he produces, boom, 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 but you're not getting more. The fourth kind, and the one we all need to aspire to be, is the projection scout. The scout that sees the player today and projects him forward. So like we drafted Shaq Mason and when I was in New England in the fourth round. And Shaq Mason was a 4-year starter at Georgia Tech, one of the most successful high school players in the country. But Georgia Tech ran a wishbone type offense. He never pass protect, and he didn't even get invited to the combine. Everybody said, "Well, he can't pass protect." My answer to that was, he's never been trained, so he's the perfect player because he has no bad habits.
Right.
Like he has no bad habits, right? Like he's never been trained for this role. So those are the kind of things, and that's through experience. Like if you don't sit down and analyze in business everything you've done good, everything you've done poorly, almost every single month, you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
You're not getting anywhere.
So I like how straight talk you are, and you're not afraid to say what you think or criticize others. So I always want to ask you, what inspired you to transition from being in the NFL to covering the NFL?
I think because in the NFL, I was too transparent and I said things. And in the NFL has a hard time distinguishing between loyalty and devotion. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Loyalty is, I'll tell Ben what he needs to hear. Devotion is, I'll tell Ben what he wants to hear. And the NFL wants people around them in the building that are devoted to them. I've never been that way. I'm going to tell you what I want to hear. And some people, just like Belichick, wants to hear that. Walsh loved that, but some people find it disloyal. And so you get, oh, that guy, he's not part of the program. He has his own agenda. Okay. But usually what will happen is that agenda will prove out to be right if you would have just listened to it. You want people around you that are going to tell you something that you don't know. Like Walsh used to say to me all the time, if we're all thinking alike, we're not, no one's thinking.
Right. It's like if you're the smartest one in the room,
you leave the room.
Yeah, you leave the room, you find a different room. It's the same concept. And I agree with that. It's, especially in business or anywhere in life with relationships, you have to be open. You have to open your lens and your filter to ideas. And how I look at it, Mike, is if someone's criticizing me, that's growth. Because obviously I have a way to learn from it. So for me, that's a beautiful thing. And it's interesting because, if you look at the NFL, it is more corporate and people are tiptoeing around and worried about losing their job. So they have to be very careful. And so once you're on the outside, so to speak, and you're able to talk about the organization, it becomes a little bit different. It's why when I launched this podcast, it allowed me to talk about commercial real estate and business and entrepreneurial and mindset and all these things that I couldn't really translate internally into my company because, we're in the society of every single word is criticized. And we learn, but we also taught our employees, we said, look, your personal life and your business life bleed into each other. Same thing. You have a bad day at business, it's going to hurt your personal life. So you got to balance it and balance your emotions. So really appreciate you sharing that. When you were a general manager, what was your strategy and thinking around investing in players and managing the salary cap? In business and in life, you're constantly budgeting and managing money. And the salary cap in sports, especially in the NFL, is like a jigsaw puzzle. How did you deal with your strategy and what were your thought process when you're dealing with that on a consistent basis?
I thought you think about what it takes to win. And you put as many resources as you can to find a quarterback. Because if you don't have a quarterback, it's almost impossible to win. And then you play the loser's game. And I have it here on my desk. The article that was written by Charles Ellis years ago. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
It's called The Loser's Game. It's basically about, Munger said this years ago. He said in his whole career, the man's 100 years old, he maybe had four big hits in the market. 4. Buffett said he maybe had 12.
Right.
Everything else was fairly good. Had some losses, but there were no devastating losses. Like there are understanding the risk, understanding what risk are we taking. And so the strategy around building a team and building a championship team starts with the quarterback. And it starts with the basic premise. If we're not good in the offensive and defensive lines, we're not going to be any good. So we have to put resources and our assets into that. And everything else we have to feed off of. And so that was my strategy. And a lot of the salary cap was related to that. It's you're going to put money in here. When I see these teams, the Bears traded a second round pick that they didn't even know what it was. The top, for Chase Claypool. I mean, you're trading for a guy who doesn't tilt the field. You solve a problem at the position, but you're giving away a potential player who could be an asset at a position that you need badly. So no one's second order thinking, okay, if we make this trade, what are we giving up or what are we getting? And I think there's too much of that. So that's the strategy. Football and business, investment business are exactly the same.
That's right.
You want to avoid the losers, and what I do at VEASAN, I do a show on VEASAN where we handicap games. I don't bet. I'm not a bettor. But it's the same thing I did in the NFL for years. I handicap teams. So when I go on Chris Russo today, here in a little bit, and I have to pick 3 games for him on his Mad Dog radio show, I'm trying to avoid the losers. I'm trying to avoid going 0-3 as more than I am trying to go 3-0, So I think that's your mindset. Like minimize what is the risk? Ask yourself, how could this not work? Everybody says, if we draft, and you'll see it after the draft, if we draft this guy's great. This guy, instead of asking the question, what could go wrong?
Right. And it's so well said. I mean, especially in commercial real estate, when we invest in commercial real estate around the United States, we're constantly looking at risk. And that's why one of our largest niches is medical office, because as I say, the human body is never going out of style. It's pandemic, recession resilient, and that's how you manage risk. But, years ago, if you look at large office towers and skyscrapers, being from Chicago, you can hear my accent. There is buildings out there, Mike, where there's 40, 50, 60% vacancy. And so the world has changed and assets have changed as well. And so when you're evaluating talent or real estate or anything, you're absolutely right. You have to really understand how to manage risk. What would you say when you were a GM, what would you say the biggest risk you took in your career?
I think the biggest risk we took in our career probably happened in 95 when we traded away from a risk not to take Warren Sapp because we were told his character wasn't up to standards, and we traded down and we got too cute, and we took a risk with a player that wasn't very good, and we passed up a player because we thought we could get him later. That player we could have gotten later was Curtis Martin. So, the other risk you take is when you take a risk on character. You take a chance on a player because you think he's going to be a good character guy. But at the end of the day, if he doesn't love football, the character will get in the way.
So as a business podcast, I'm always interested in how my guests approach investing. All our listeners want to know, what do they do, whether that's financially or with your time, because time is your most valuable asset, or anything else. How do you think about investments in your life and managing your time, and what areas are you focusing on to drive future growth?
I think I have this quote on here on my computer by Rick Rubin. He says, "We are in service to the work more than the audience." Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of how I've wanted to live my life when I've left the NFL, is like work. Do the work that makes you happy. Put yourself into the work. Give the work your passion. And then I have another one. What is motivating you today? Like, I'm a self-employed. I'm not motivated now by getting to the office early because I think somebody will see that I get in early. I'm motivated by what kind of work do I do and what is my production each day. And so I've transitioned from being a football guy to being a writer. So I've had to adjust my day in starting with writing and starting with doing those things. And I love it. And my mornings are spent writing. My middays are spent football. So I've broken my day up and I've been able to do different things at different times. And I've enjoyed that. But I think I've learned this from reading Robert. I'm a huge fan of Robert Caro. And every morning when he goes to his office, he used to be in the Fisk building, but I don't know where his office is now in New York City. He's only written 5 books in his life. And when he goes to work, he's now on the 5th book. He's on the last volume of Lyndon Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote one book on Robert Moses, and then he's written 4 books on Lyndon Johnson, and he has a 5th one to finish. He reads a paragraph of what the book is about before he starts his day to remind him of what his job is that day. Now, he reads it every day, but I think sometimes we all have to center ourselves. Like I remind myself, I'm a writer. I got to write every day. I write the Daily Coach. I got to write for the company I work for. I've got to write in my journal. I got to write every day. And if I don't do that, then I'm not doing my job, and I'm not being who I want to be. So I think a lot of it is, and then you've got to do what you do, what you feel most comfortable doing in the routine you do it in. I can't do, like Belichick, he's amazing. I mean, he could work, he'll get there at 5, 6 o'clock, and he could go to 11. Mm-hmm. I might get there at 5 and go to 8.
Where does he find that energy?
I don't know.
He's not young anymore. I
know, but it's remarkable. It's really because he's never working.
Uh-huh.
And his mind as Al Davis told me, and I wrote about this in the new book, he lives in the NFL. He doesn't work in it.
Right. It's great. It's his love, not his passion. He loves what he's doing. So Mike, you're a grandfather. And congratulations, you've stepped up in the world. You get to take care of the kids, and then you get to leave. You have one of the best jobs.
Yeah, I wish that were my job. All my kids come here for the summer. They stay here. So, but it is the greatest. It is the greatest. Someone told me that the greatest thrill in life is watching your wife love your grandchildren, and I think that happened to be really true.
So, how do you think about talking to your sons and grandchildren about money and investing and the lessons that you've learned in your career?
I would tell them nothing is overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Let's just continue to make a lot of progress every single day. Howard Marks, who writes the emails for Oak Tree Capital, I'm sure you know who Howard is.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking to one of the investors of a pension plan, and he asked him, he said, well, where did you rank in investments? And he said, well, this year we ranked 33rd in this investment, and we ranked 47th, but we ranked 4th overall. And for Marks, wait a minute. You never finished in the top 20, but by the end of the year, you ranked 4th. That's right. Why is that? Because we didn't have any losses. Everybody else had these losses. It's the Belichickian. Look, we're not going to get rich overnight. It's every day. Just do it every day.
That's right.
Investments no different than anything. Competitive stamina. Don't get bored. If something's earning money for you, it may not be as much as the guy next door. Don't get bored. Charlie Munger says this all the time. Greed is what kills most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
greed,
lack of consistency and discipline.
Right.
So I'm sure you're very proud of both your sons being coaches. And when they were growing up, what did you focus on most when it came to coaching and football strategy? I mean, what would you bet your grandchildren's interests are in sports might be?
They probably love football. I mean, it's kind of in our blood. Mm-hmm. I would say this. I told my 2 sons early at an early age that you have to understand the difference between coaching and criticism. What I say to you is coaching. It's not criticizing. And when you take that in as coaching, you'll become better. And it's the same thing I tell my grandkids, like you got to be, and we have to teach our kids how to be strategic learners,
mm-hmm.
And we got to light that curiosity. Parcells had that, he used to have the MacArthur Creed of Youth on his wall. MacArthur, I think, got it from Sam Ullman. It's a poem. Youth is, it's a beautifully written thing. And sometimes it's associated, but, it talks about how when we lose our enthusiasm, when we lose our will to work, when we lose our curiosity. I just watched this show on Netflix about how to live to these, what they call blue zones, where these centurions live to 100. And most of it has nothing to do with diet. It has nothing to do with anything other than being curious, maintaining your curiosity, being active. There's a little town in Sardinia in Italy. They have to walk up hills every day. So it helps their heart. And it's not that they're exercising or gym memberships. It's that they're active, And so I think we all have to do that. And that's a good way to teach your children.
So our audience rang in with some questions. I wanted to ask you, who do you feel was the best defense you've seen in your lifetime in the NFL as a unit?
I would say the Bears of '85 was incredible.
Oh, the best. They were all right.
The Ravens in 2000 were really good. I think, I learned that they were faster on tape than they were faster in the game than on tape, but it would be hard to block the Bears today.
Yeah, they were dominating. And what about running backs? Favorite running back, one you just gravitate to? There's a lot. There's so many to choose from. I could watch Barry Sanders run all the time. I mean, I think if Barry Sanders is running, I write about it in Football Done Right. When he was a kid, his parents bought him that electric football game. And he fell in love with it because it reminded him of that's how he wanted to run. And if you think about it, that's how he did run, all over the place. I love Barry Sanders. Curtis Martin, even though he's not in my top 100, I love how he ran. He ran the football. When you watch Lenny Moore, who's one of the top players of all time, he runs like Tony Pollard today, or Tony Pollard runs like him. I mean, of course, Jim Brown's incredible to watch run too. So I know we're only in the third week of the season, but based on your analysis, what teams do you think have the best shot that we're going to see towards the latter part of the year and potentially in the Super Bowl?
The ones that'll get better, right? Everybody wants to anoint a champion today. The ones who constantly improve, who are willing to admit they need improvement, who have the competitive stamina to want to improve. I think San Francisco won last night and they know they didn't play well. That's a really powerful thing. And as a coach, you want to come in there and say, look, we won this game, but we didn't play well. That's really important. And when Kansas City hasn't played well in 2 weeks, but they've 2-0. This is such a marathon, that there's so many teams that could be out there that could win. But it's the ones that have that competitive stamina that can do it. That when you join the Navy SEALs, they take 175 people from all over, right? And they spend $500 million trying to find out who could be a Navy SEAL, right? What's the ingredients? Because, the Navy's a business too. They're pissed off that they're spending all this money and they come up with only 30 people, right?
Right.
And so what they find out is the ones that put their helmets in the quad are the ones who can't handle volume every day. Like, everybody can do it once in a while. Everybody can do it once a week, twice a week. You ask somebody to be at their best every single day, jog 6 every day. That's a mindset. And the champions of the NFL have to have that mindset.
It's such a long season too, with injuries and it's just constant. How do you feel about the Jets and losing Aaron Rodgers like 4 plays into the season? And how does a team like that pick up the pieces after so much hype? They were the lead on Hard Knocks this year. What do you do? Let's say you're the GM of that team. You have a tremendous amount of experience in leading and being a GM. How do you handle that situation when you have someone that's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time goes down, you bring them into a high profile city like that, and then all of a sudden it just changes the dynamic of your team?
Yeah. I wrote about this for the Daily Coach after it happened. First thing you have to do is basically say, Aaron's not with the team anymore. It's gone. He's done. You don't want to be insensitive, but we're moving on. We're only going to we can only focus on what's here. Second is, I got to show you how we're going to win the game a different way. We got to change who we are now, because we spent 6 weeks practicing this way. Now we got to change this way. And then you've got to also ask everybody to add 1% more to what they're doing, because everybody's got to pick up the slack. We got to win with defense. We got to win with the kicking game. And then 4, we got to trust the process. We're not going to turn this around and become a great team overnight when we lost a guy that we built everything around. So we're going to have to rebuild it. You don't rebuild houses in a day. It takes some time, but we're going to rebuild it. And I think you have to convince people of that. And there's going to be a lot of noise outside the building that says we can't do it. but trust me, we can. It's one of Belichick's greatest strengths is what makes Belichick so good is what makes Walsh so good is they can predict the outcome before the outcome. They see it. And so they tell the team, here's what's going to happen if we don't do this. Here's what will happen if we don't do that. And that's what Robert Saleh of the Jets has to. He has to lead. It's time for him to lead. It's time for him to take that step and say, okay, fellas, follow me. We're still good.
It's so well said. Before we wrap up, is there anything else about your newly launched book or other causes you're involved in you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I write we have a daily coach, which is a man by the name of George Raveling, who's from California, who's from out there in Los Angeles now, former basketball coach at USC, Washington State, and Iowa. Actually was on the stage when Dr. King gave the I Have a Dream speech. Actually was the owner of the I Have a Dream speech. Dr. King handed it to him on that stage. He and I were having dinner one night in Playa del Rey, and we were both reading Bill Campbell's book, A $1 Trillion Coach, and we both said, everybody needs a coach. Michael needs a coach. George needs a coach. So we started the Daily Coach, and we've been doing it for 4 years, and we write it every day. It's a leadership message every single day. We have now over 35,000 subscribers. We have a high open rate. We're starting a Daily Coach community now to help young leaders, like the Young President Society. So I'm involved with that. I have a podcast called the GM Shuffle where we talk about football and leadership. And I do this for VSiN. I work for VSiN, which is part of the DraftKings network, which has been tremendous for me. So my days are full. It's good, and I like it.
Well, Mike Lombardi, thank you so much for joining us today. I know your time is precious. Let's wrap up with our 3 questions. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. In our studio in Laguna Beach, we have a couch. I would say, Mike, get on the couch, take off your shoes, close your eyes, relax. How old are you now?
64.
You look fabulous for 64. I don't know what you're doing, but you do not look 64. Keep up the good work. So I would say lay on the couch, close your eyes, go back to when you were 16 years old. So you're 64, tremendous amount of success, leadership, have worked for a fine organization in the NFL and outside the NFL. And you could go back and talk to yourself when you're 16. What advice would you share with yourself now, knowing what you know now at this age?
Be patient.
Okay.
Don't let ambition run your life. Be patient. Chase your dream, but be patient.
Oh, I love that. So it's our last day on earth. God forbid. It's just me and you. It's our last meal together. Your choice. What are we eating and what are we drinking?
Well, we're definitely drinking Sinatra Select from Jack Daniels.
Okay.
We're definitely drinking that. And we are going to eat some form of an Italian meal that whatever the chef makes, I'll eat. Okay. We'll pretend we're at Rayo's.
Oh, that's good. I like that place. So in our studio in Laguna Beach, we have a black door. And when you walk through the door, you'll see a grand piano, Mike. You'll see a drum set, electric and acoustical guitars. If you're in studio with me and you can sit down and choose any band or musician to walk through that black door, they could be living or deceased. It's your choice. Who's coming through the black door and what song are they playing us?
Springsteen's coming through the door and he's going to play Racing in the Street.
Oh, I love that. Fantastic.
Because Racing in the Street, most people think it's a song about a race, and really Springsteen's asking the question, what do we do with our sins?
Love that.
What do we do with our sins?
Well, Mike Lombardi, thank you for joining us today on the I Own It Show. What a privilege. And thanks for spending some time with us. If you are interested in listening to more episodes like this on the I Own It Show, kick that right-hand button and click the like button as much as possible. And as I say out there in the ether, let it go viral. To follow me, go to benreinberg.com. You can follow me on all different social media platforms. And if you are an accredited investor and you are looking to build wealth for you and your family, look no further. Go to our company, AllianceCGC.com. We are the leaders in investing in commercial real estate throughout the United States If you are looking to develop cash flow and upside on your capital, look no further. Log on to our brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund. It is the hottest fund in the United States. And like I say, the human body is never going out of style. Michael Lombardi, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.